Valentine's Day, February 14, fell on a Monday this year. By the time I arrived at the Cosi family restaurant, it was already bustling with diners. I was shown to my seat just 3 minutes before my 7 o'clock reservation. After giving the waiter my drink order and politely mentioning that I could find my own way to my seat, he nodded and left me with 2 menus. Positioned with my back to the wall, I placed the heavy, plain Italian brown bottle bag I had been carrying by its white twisted thread handles at the vacant place sitting opposite me. Leaning against it was a large C4-sized white card envelope. I had arrived first and was alone. As I glanced around the room, a feeling of claustrophobia set in. The past 2 years of lockdowns, punctuated only by brief periods of eased restrictions, had only recently come to an end. It had been exactly 2 years since I last sat at this table, which used to be our favorite. By regular, I meant a monthly date night, always booked well in advance to secure this particular spot. The restaurant, filled with intimate 2-person tables, was appropriately crowded for the occasion. However, after almost 2 years of pandemic restrictions and social distancing, the closeness felt slightly uncomfortable rather than cozy. I guessed I had become accustomed to isolation, both due to the restrictions and having worked from home for so long. The waiter returned with a bottle, uncorked it, and poured a sample into a glass for me to taste. I nodded my approval and asked for only half a glass to be poured before he left me alone once more. Out of what must have been 25 to 30 small tables in this section, only 3 or 4 were unoccupied, one of them right next to mine. Without scrutinizing too closely, I noticed that mine was the only table with a single diner. Even before it crossed my mind that Grace might be running late, as she had been lately, I heard the quiet beep of my phone, indicating a new message. Retrieving it from my suit jacket pocket, I pressed the button to light up the screen. The time flashed, 19 to 1. I always use the 24-hour setting on my phone and digital clocks. I've been a freelance feature writer for almost 8 years now, but for 14 years before that, I was a Fleet Street daily newspaperman. I started as a copyholder, responsible for small ads and general errands, then moved on to junior reporter, senior reporter, and sub-editor roles, mostly on the late afternoon and evening lobster shift. While words and facts are essential in daily journalism, deadlines are absolutely paramount. As I swiped and tapped my screen to access my messages, I couldn't help but notice in my peripheral vision that the empty table next to me on the left was being occupied. The lady of the happy couple brushed past me, wearing a 3/4 coat and a long dark blue dress, to reach her seat by the wall. This brought a faint smile to my face for the second time today. It wasn't a warm smile. I was long past that. It was a chilly February night in our part of the world, and my wife's seat of choice, had she arrived on time, would have been exactly where I now sat, right in front of the radiator. I smiled not for Grace, whom I hadn't even seen this morning as she left early for a strategy meeting at work, but for my kids. I had dropped them off at school, kissed them, and reminded them to be on their best behavior tonight. I wondered if I would manage to do the same. I had arranged for Grace's parents to pick them up after school and keep them overnight, allowing Grace and me to celebrate our anniversary without worrying about Gavin and Nora. The tables were close together, and as the lady passed through the narrow gap beside me, I caught a whiff of her delightful perfume. It was rich and alluring at first, then turned light and flowery as it lingered, an intoxicating scent that could captivate anyone near her. Lucky bastard, I thought, momentarily taking my eyes off my phone to glance at the seat diagonally opposite, where her partner would sit. However, the seat was empty. I only saw the back of the departing maitre d' John Jr., the owner's fresh-faced son, hurrying to greet the next couple at the entrance. It seemed the lovely-smelling lady was waiting for her beau, just as I was waiting for my rather tardy wife. Today marked 10 years of our marriage, exactly to the day. We always came to this very table, or at least this spot. Sometimes it was a different table to accommodate 4 or 6, with high chairs if needed, on special occasions and holidays whenever the restrictions allowed. This was the place where Grace and I had our first date, where I proposed and she accepted, and where we celebrated all our family birthdays and anniversaries, including today's milestone. Our anniversary held a deep significance for us, beyond just being Valentine's Day, the holiday honoring lovers. It was also the day we got married, Tuesday, February 14, 2012, at 11 a.m. at the local registrar's office. Both 29 at the time, we felt the pressure of Grace's biological clock ticking loudly. Unbeknownst to me then, Grace was already pregnant with our son Gavin. She only revealed it on our wedding night, mentioning she had missed her period by a week, a realization that had only dawned on her that morning amidst the whirlwind of wedding preparations. Despite her initial hesitation to tell me until we were alone, I would have married her regardless. By the time we tied the knot, we had been living together and were a couple for exactly 5 years, with the wedding planned months in advance. Grace was always the one for me, long before I asked her to marry me. Interestingly, her running late had become a recurring theme over the years. She was notably late on our 8th wedding anniversary, 2 years ago. I had waited here alone, my eyes fixed on the same brick wall, forewarned by a similar running late message on an older phone. I lingered until 9 p.m. before I had to give up our table, leaving a room full of affectionate couples while I made the lone walk of shame. I insisted on paying the approximate cost of a meal for 2 at the front desk before leaving. Michael, the restaurant owner, was apologetic yet firm about needing the table back on such a busy night. This happened just weeks before the first lockdown began. Grace and I met 15 years ago, at a wedding in late January when we were both 24. I knew the groom from college. She had gone to school with the bride. My job at the newspaper kept me working late hours, with little time for a social life or relationships. Grace was preoccupied with her bar exams, also focused on her career as a lawyer. Serendipitously, we both lived in the same town and commuted to London for work. My days off were Tuesday and Wednesday back then, and she suggested we meet in a couple of weeks. We checked our calendars and settled on February 14 at this very family restaurant, where I had never dined before. Grace had worked here as a waitress during her school and college holidays, and even weekends before that while still in school. And so, our Valentine's Day anniversary was a blend of our love story, a celebration of firsts, and the beginning of a life journey together. If our date goes well, she said, we can exchange phone numbers and take it from there. I didn't grasp the significance of the date until I got home. A first date with a stranger on Valentine's Day. It seemed too good to be true for an ordinary guy like me with a gorgeous girl like her. I suspected she might be playing a prank and would probably joke about it with the bride after the honeymoon. Since she offered to book the table, I figured at least it wouldn't hit my wallet. As the date drew closer, I started to wonder if she might be serious. What if she was genuinely interested? If I chickened out, I'd ruin my reputation with my college friend and lose any shot with Grace. But if it was all a joke, showing up wouldn't cost me anything. I decided to give it a try, show up on time, and if she didn't appear within 10 minutes, I'd bow out and save the restaurant the trouble. When I arrived and asked the maitre d' about a reservation for Grace James, he replied, "Certainly, sir, she's waiting for you." There she was, looking stunning and even more enchanting in person. Considering my history with tight deadlines, I knew bringing a traditional Valentine card would be tacky and embarrassing for both of us. So I enlisted the help of a studio overseer in the print room. One of the country's top cartoonists whipped up a brilliant design, which we printed in color. It was a card that read, "Be my next year's Valentine," featuring a cartoon version of me with chains and a padlock around my chest, and a caricature of Grace with a blazing acetylene torch and a welder's helmet captioned, "Unlock my heart, but please don't melt it." She laughed as soon as she saw the card signed by an admirer who wants to get to know you better. Our first date turned out splendidly. We felt at ease and quickly decided to see each other again. Soon, We became exclusive, and after a few passionate months, we moved into my small flat together. A couple of years later, we exchanged engagement rings, but it took 3 more years before we finally got married and started hunting for a family home in our hometown. We were both deeply invested in our careers. By that time, I had become a sub-editor and was also writing regular weekend feature articles. I knew it would take years before I could become a fully fledged editor. Once our son was about 2 years old, Grace, who specialized in corporate law, expressed her desire to return to her job. So I transitioned to freelance writing and embraced the role of a house husband. Our youngest, Nora, was an unexpected but equally cherished addition to our family. Grace only spent a couple of months with her before going back to work. Nora, now 6, has always been very attached to me, seeing me in both parental roles. Gavin, on the other hand, is easygoing and has adapted well to our family dynamics. Grace thrived in her career, securing a junior partnership shortly after Nora was born. However, lately, she hasn't seemed as happy with me. Last February, during the lockdown, everything was closed. I ordered Chinese takeaway, left Grace's portion in the fridge, and went to bed alone. She used the familiar excuse of work, endless late nights preparing vital documents for mergers and acquisitions, requiring the entire firm's attention. This year, in anticipation of Valentine's Day, I booked a table weeks in advance, from 7 p.m. to closing time. I even prepaid for an estimated bill, covering up to 4 average a la carte meals and drinks. When I made the arrangements, Michael, the restaurant owner, said it wasn't necessary. He reminded me that Grace had booked tables there for 4 years as a student, and our family connection warranted special treatment, but I insisted on paying up front. I was not accustomed to this vantage point in the restaurant, back against the wall. I finally understood why it was Grace's favorite spot. It offered a full view of everyone entering, the bar area, and even the front entrance, all while benefiting from the warmth of a nearby radiator during the cold winter. From my usual seat, I could only see my dinner guest and the brick wall behind them. No wonder Grace deemed this our favorite table. A beep on my mobile phone snapped me back to reality. I read the message. Sorry, Hans, still at work, all 860 mins. The brevity of the message spoke volumes to me. Even the use of all and 8 signified the minimal effort and time Grace could spare for me in favor of whatever else she was doing. I smiled for only the 3rd time that day, a smile devoid of humor. I hadn't reminded Grace this morning about our dinner reservations or even mentioned our anniversary since last year. Now, here I was sitting alone, while Grace was occupied elsewhere. Even on Valentine's Day, our 10th wedding anniversary, she had more pressing matters. Tin is the traditional gift for the 10th anniversary, along with diamonds or the colors silver and blue. That thought brought my attention to the woman sitting alone at the table next to me. She wore a blue dress, and her perfume, distinctly different from any my wife preferred, lingered faintly. I wondered if the woman in blue was here for a similar celebration, or simply enjoyed wearing blue tonight. Was she waiting for someone, a boyfriend, husband, or lover? My thoughts wandered as I glanced at the menu. Trying to muster an appetite, I picked up my phone and put it down again, deciding to order a starter. I needed something to accompany the sips I'd taken from the glass of Chianti, Grace's favorite. It wasn't my usual choice, but I wasn't in the mood for anything heavier. Perhaps I would make a sandwich and have a beer later at home. Looks like we've both been stood up, came a husky female voice from the adjacent table, cutting through my veil of solitude like a hot knife. I looked up and to my left. Despite the dim lighting and unlit candles, I could see her clearly. Her open face, dark brown eyes, and soft, dark wavy hair framing her face made her a true beauty. Sorry, I said. I was miles away. Was that wishful thinking? She asked softly, her small smile inviting a conversation. Maybe, I shrugged, glancing at my phone, and then back at her. She's still at work, or so she says. Running late, she says. I'm not even sure if she'll make it tonight. Last time, I hesitated, unsure if I should divulge too much to a stranger, especially one seemingly looking forward to a romantic evening more than I was. But then I thought, to hell with it. I had bottled this up for too long. Leaning in, I added quietly, last time she didn't make it at all. Last time? What, like last week, or last year? No, wait, not last year, but actually 2 years ago. You know, I said, noticing her nodding, and those lovely soft curls framing her face. Her dark brown hair was set in loose, bouncy ringlets. So this time, 2 years ago, was our 8th anniversary. Tonight marks our 10th. Wow, 10 years. That's aluminum, she guessed. Tin, I corrected. Like a tin of beans, biscuits, or maybe clean peaches and syrup. I was actually thinking a can of worms, but that seemed too intimate to share with a stranger, no matter how young and beautiful she looked. Or tomato soup, she added with a sad smile, her expression hinting at her own unhappy memories. Comfort food. Tins are like comfort food, something you turn to when things aren't going so well, like baked beans on toast or alphabet spaghetti. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. That's all right. I guess she's otherwise occupied tonight, I said. Is she a doctor or a nurse? She asked. Some professions are vitally important, and staffing issues can mean those left behind have to keep everything running. Life or death situations can sometimes be more important than, you know. No, she's a lawyer, I said. Oh, all right. Scum of the earth, huh? I joked, tempering the remark with a smile and a shrug. She was just a stranger, passing time with a lonely old man while waiting for her date. She didn't need to hear the troubles I've been dealing with for the past couple of years. She made junior partner 3 years ago, and well, the workload shot up, so she tells me. The stranger sitting next to me looked nice, probably a kid really, eager for her evening out with a beau. No need to burden her with my problems. I wasn't here to share my misery, just to brace myself mentally for what came next. Well, she countered. At least she's not a school headmistress. Oh, is that what you are? I asked. Sort of, she said. Preschool. I'm the proprietor, or should that be proprietress, of a preschool. Not as bad as a secondary school headmistress then. You must have lots of sweet children aged 3 and 4, a nice age, if I remember correctly. True, they are sweet. We start with 2-year-olds, but I have specialist staff who love the babies. She laughed, more to herself than anything. I must admit, I do love the littlies too, and hate handing some of them back to their parents at the end of the day. Oh God, I interjected. I remember the terrible tours. I did vividly. Not so much with Gavin, but Nora was a nightmare, always needing her mom who was busy chasing that junior partnership when Nora needed her the most. They're not so bad, she laughed. At least we can hand the troublesome few back at the end of the day. We make sure they sit quietly for a snack, then lunch, and then it's time for a nap. Most of them doze off for at least a little while. So you can put the kettle on then? I asked. Absolutely. Tea and biscuits for the staff. Essential me time, she giggled. Do you have young children? 2. Gavin is 9 and Nora is 6. Actually, they went to a nearby preschool from ages 3 to 4. The one at the Baptist Chapel. Is that your preschool? No, mine is the Ferning Glen Preschool on Home Farm Road in the retail units of the Old Farm by West Ring Park. The old barn? I asked, and she nodded. I've been to the farm shop and cafe there in the converted stables. The kids love the playground by the Sangland countryside walk behind the old farm. Now that I think about it, I've definitely seen the signs for your preschool. How many children are there? We have 72 registered, but since lockdown, some only come 2 or 3 days a week, or even just half days. We have to be flexible, so parents book their slots. We make sure we have enough staff to meet legal requirements. I tend to float and jump in where needed. My phone beeped again. "Excuse me, just need to check this message," I said, picking up my phone. It read 1928. Grace had sent another message instead of calling. "Sorry, Han. More alts to docs. Getting pizza. Back very late, XXS." I turned back to the woman. Grace is my wife of 10 years. She won't make it tonight, and has ordered pizza at work, apparently. "Oh, that's unfortunate. Did you get her a card? And is that a bottle?" "Well, it's a special occasion, and we missed each other this morning." "It's not a bottle. It's a novelty vintage tin can. It looks like a 1950s can of peaches, but it's actually empty with a removable lid for storage," I rambled on. "It comes as a set of 6 cans with different labels. I only brought one along to give her." "Oh, that's a thoughtful idea. Perfect for a 10th anniversary." I thought so. I realized I'd been going on without introducing myself. "Sorry, it's rude of me to mention my wife and kids without introducing myself. My friends call me Ken." I extended my hand, offering a sheepish smile. The tables were so close together that she didn't even need to lean over to gently shake my extended hand. She smiled warmly, her expression more inviting and beautiful than I could ever muster. "My friends call me Lottie, but you can call me Lottie," she giggled. "Sorry, when you said my friends call me, I just couldn't resist." I laughed with her, charmed by her lightheartedness. She had a delightful giggle. "Well, my birth name is Mackenzie. It was a name my mother liked because one of her brothers had it as a middle name. Back in school, the name cropped up in a couple of American children's TV shows that were popular at the time, always used as a girl's name. I hated being called Mac, so I preferred Kenzie as a kid. Later on, I thought Kenzie sounded childish, so I asked my friends to call me Ken instead. My oldest and best friend, Ethan, who I went to school with, still calls me Ken's most of the time we hang out. "I see. Well, my full name is Charlotte, but I've always been called Lottie. I like it, and it goes so well with my married name, Lottie Clark. It suited me so well that I kept it even after letting my ex-husband go." "Was he blind or just plain stupid?" I blurted out without thinking. Without missing a beat, she replied, "Stupid. Definitely stupid. He cheated and thought he was entitled to get away with it. The pompous, immature arse." "Agreed. He must have been very stupid. I can't stand cheats and liars. I believe for a marriage to work, there has to be complete honesty," I said, adding, "As soon as I said blind or stupid, I realized it could have been interpreted very differently. I'm sorry about that." She giggled again. "I think I'm a good judge of character, with that one notable exception you now know about, but you seem like a nice person. I took your comment as complimentary rather than derogatory, and it didn't hint at any hidden agenda. You are, after all, Ken, waiting for your wife in a romantic dining room on the most romantic night of the year, or so they say. I was, but now my wife won't make it, and I don't really have much of an appetite anymore." "But you were just looking over the menu, weren't you?" "Yes, I was perhaps considering a starter. The food here is delicious, and I thought I could manage something light. What about you? Is your boyfriend or fiancé running late as well?" "The food here is great, I should know. I worked in the kitchen while studying for my education degree and master's. No boyfriend, fiancé, or husband, I'm afraid. Single, a divorcee as I mentioned, and never made it past 3 and a bit years. Not that I'm bitter, I'm actually relieved. Tonight, Valentine's Day, I'm on a blind date with someone I've never met. My sister persuaded me it was time to get back into the dating game and set me up." You haven't dated since your ex-husband was caught?" "My sister and my mother-in-law, actually. And yes, my ex was caught red-handed, immediately kicked out, and 6 months later, I had the house free and clear of his input, without having to share my business. But I let him keep his." "Did you have a good prenup?" "No, I was the blind and trusting one in our relationship, so no handy prenup. But I did have video and voice recorded evidence of his cheating. Lottie laughed. Both Ryan's business practice and my press school were largely financed by his mother. He's an only son, and she's quite wealthy. Ever since I was introduced to her, she's treated me like a daughter, even after the divorce. She believes we split amicably and blames herself for Ryan's immaturity. She's continued her support for me. I've even increased the level of payments over the last 3 years, just in case. My business took a dip during lockdown, but I was helped by government furlough payments and a couple of local government grants to take in more children from essential services. When it got out that we were helping the children of nurses, doctors, and hospital staff, donations from local supermarkets and the community went up too. So, what was your ex's business, the one you left alone? I asked. Dentistry. It costs a fortune to buy into a successful practice. Ryan is handsome and charming on the surface, and he had money, which opens the right doors. Once he bought into a good practice with his mother's money, he seemed to think that intruding into attractive and trusting women's mouths was also an invitation to intrude a little further, if you get what I mean. Oh my God, he was involved with his patients. At least 3 of them. I got the videos, telephone taps, their appointment histories at the surgery, along with the subsequent hotel room receipts. And he got the t-shirt, she smiled. Actually, I got the t-shirt and every other shirt off his back too. His main worries were the reputation of his business, his dental practice partners, and the wrath of his mother. That's appalling, I said, shocked. I'm amazed you're even considering dating. I think it would put me off relationships altogether. My sister and mother-in-law insisted. It's been 3 years since the divorce. They were quite persuasive. At least this is a safe, crowded place to meet a stranger. Yes, I often come here to eat. Alone. Mostly, although sometimes my sister joins me, occasionally my parents, and more recently, my mother-in-law has taken a liking to the place. Well, I don't think much of your blind date. He must be crazy to miss out on such pleasant and beautiful company. Maybe he sent a message or an apology. My phone hasn't beeped all evening. Look, Ken, I know you were planning to have a starter. I'm actually famished. It's my first date in 3 years, and I couldn't eat a thing at lunchtime. Not even tea and biscuits when the babies went down for a nap. No, not even then. I was too nervous. But, well, you seem like a nice married bloke with no hidden agenda, and I see the maitre d' is turning away another couple at the door who haven't booked. Maybe we could share a table and leave one free for a couple celebrating their romantic dinner. Well, since Grace is having pizza and won't be home until late. And your kids are at their grandparents', so we could continue our entertaining conversation, enjoy some good food, and help out a couple who might otherwise be turned away because the place is packed tonight. It is a night for lovers, so yes, we could share a table and free one up. Shall I move to your table? Why don't I move to yours? That way, if your wife shows up, you can see her coming and give me a heads up so I can grab my handbag before things get awkward. She laughed, and so did I. As Lottie spoke, she stood up and signaled the maitre d', indicating with subtle hand movements that she was moving to my table. The maitre d' nodded back in understanding and turned to the newly arrived couple, an older pair, before guiding them in our direction with a couple of menus. I moved the bottle bag and card envelope from the opposite place, setting to the floor beside my chair, out of the way. I'm sure it wouldn't come to blows, Lottie. Is she not the jealous type, Ken? In different circumstances, perhaps, but like you, though well before your time, she used to work here as a waitress. She's known to the owners and their kids who work here. Seeing me with another woman at our usual table, knowing she was expected after 7 p.m., wouldn't look suspicious. I'm sure she'd understand it's just a chance meeting and a sensible sharing arrangement to everyone's benefit. Your wife must be quite understanding, she remarked as she draped her coat over her chair and settled into what would have been my seat if Grace was here. I noticed she hadn't brought a drink with her. I have a bottle of Chianti here, which I certainly won't finish by myself since I'm driving. How about joining me for a glass? That's very kind of you, Ken, thank you. It's nice to know that there are still gentlemen around. I wasn't sure what my date would want, so I waited before ordering. No need to wait any longer. As my guest at my table, I want you to know that I've already settled the bill in advance, so feel free to order anything you like. It's on me. That's very generous, Ken. Your wife is a lucky woman. You'd have to tell her that. I will, if she shows up, she grinned. As I poured the wine for Lottie and topped up my own glass, the maitre d' led the newly arrived couple to Lottie's now empty table. They were much older than us, not that we were a couple, and I guess they were in their 60s or 70s. I gave Lottie a heads up. She simply smiled in response. I thought Ryan was a fool for losing her, and anyone who cheats is an idiot in my book. If a relationship isn't working, discuss the problems and work it out. If ending it is the only solution, do it together. As for Mr. Blind Date, he was a fool for missing out on her, especially if her mother and sister were as beautiful. As the older woman passed between us to reach her seat by the radiator, I caught a whiff of her perfume, an older, familiar scent. It was likely something classy, like Chanel, and it smelled expensive. The maitre d' lit their candle first, then turned to us with raised eyebrows. I nodded, and he lit our candle before departing. In the gentle flickering light, I could see Lottie more clearly than the sideways glances our original seating positions had forced. Her dark, soft ringlet curls bounced on her shoulders, perfectly framing her face. Her features were even, her eyes dark brown pools surrounded by the clear whites, her lashes long and dark under thin arched eyebrows, and her lips full and red. She looked up and smiled, revealing a slight dimple on her left cheek, the right obscured by a bouncing curl. I heard the rustle of my new neighbor to my left as she wriggled in her seat, trying to shed her winter coat. She slipped her arms out of the sleeves, allowing the coat to casually drape over the back of her chair, inside out. As she adjusted herself more comfortably, she leaned over and said, "Thank you so much for making room for us. Paul was sure he had booked weeks ago, but they didn't find our email until they checked that. What was it, dear?" She turned to her husband across the table. He looked older than the brief glimpse I had caught of his wife as they approached. His face was long, thin, and deeply wrinkled, with a tan that suggested he spent a lot of time outdoors, perhaps gardening. "The junk file, sweetheart," he replied. Although I was sure, I got a confirmation straight away. Getting here 10 minutes early wasn't a problem. While Mia's accent was that of a duchess or at least a lady, Paul's voice was no match. His local accent had more hints of the rural than the urban, matching the town's mixed urban and semi-rural character that I had grown up with. Maya turned back to me. "We saw the maitre d' look your way as we arrived. When Paul gave him our names, I looked around and wondered why two singles were sitting at separate tables on such a traditionally romantic night. But when your young lady got up and moved, suddenly your table was available. Quite fortunate for us. Anyway, thank you most sincerely. I'm Mia, by the way, and my husband is Paul. We're celebrating our 46th anniversary tonight. What about you two? Aren't you celebrating anything special?" She spoke with an assured cut-glass accent that seemed genuine rather than affected. She looked as regal as her voice sounded, her age difficult to pin down but likely at least mid-60s, significantly younger than Paul. Her features were open, with high cheekbones and sparkling, intelligent eyes that hinted at both joy and mischief. She possessed a timeless, classic beauty that few women maintain with age, similar to certain Hollywood or London theater actresses who convincingly portray 30-year-olds while celebrating careers or marriages spanning 4 decades. Before I could gather my thoughts to respond, Lottie spoke up. "We're Ken and Lottie," she began warmly. "Mia, Paul, it's so lovely to see you here. 46 years, eh? How wonderful. Now, Ken and I are actually strangers who met for the very first time tonight. Our acquaintance is less than an hour old, more like 46 minutes than years, I guess, but we're fast becoming friends. We've had a lovely conversation, and Ken is such a sweet gentleman to spend time with. Ken's wife of 10 years, Grace, was supposed to join him tonight to celebrate their 10th anniversary, but she's running late. She works long hours as a junior partner at her law firm and just messaged saying she'll settle for a pizza at work. Honestly, pizza from a box when she could have dined at the best family restaurant in town. What was she thinking? As for me, Mia, I'm currently single. My blind date seems to have lost his way and hasn't shown up. I've been abandoned in my prime. So Ken kindly invited me to join him, freeing up the table. He's even sharing his drink with me. Isn't that nice of him? Mia turned back from Lottie to look at me. Lottie's absolutely right. You are a gentleman, Ken, a rare gem these days. If your wife prefers work over celebrating such an important occasion with the most important man in her life, there must be a sensible reason. Is she defending an innocent person whose lifelong liberty is at risk? I had to chuckle. Mia was spot on. The situation was too absurd to make any sense of. I thought, why should I make excuses? Actually, she's a corporate lawyer, I said, mustering a dry laugh. Excuse my language, but she's a cum-sucking lawyer. What she's doing to me, our children, and our marriage is unreasonable to the point where I have no intention of enduring another minute, let alone another 36 years. Mia reached out and squeezed my lower left arm. I looked down to see my tightly clenched fists on the table. Lottie warmly wrapped her hands around my right fist. No need to apologize for expressing heartfelt passion and anguish, dear. Mia cooed gently in my ear, so close I could feel her breath. Grace is a foolish woman if the jeopardy in question is her own marriage. I relaxed my fists, releasing the tension in my spine, and let out the breath I had been holding. My eyes brimmed with tears, feeling the release of a day's worth of tension. What's going on, Ken? Came a voice from above that I instantly recognized, even through my blurred vision. Blinking away the tears, I looked up to see my wife Grace standing slightly behind, and to the right side of Lottie, glaring down at the table where I was holding hands with two women. Though I had unclenched my fists, Lottie and Mia still held on. Oh, hi Han, you made it. Only about an hour late, I greeted her, trying to keep my tone light. I actually have an anniversary gift for you, but my hands are a little full at the moment. I can see that, Grace snapped. I came home early after getting a call from Mom. The kids wanted to say goodnight, and then said you were here for. She hesitated. Lady Mia, what are you doing here, and why are you holding Ken's hand? Hello, Grace, dear. Long time no see. How have you been? Maya responded with a smile. Nice business suit, dear. Came straight from work, did we? Yes, Grace stammered. I tried to get home and change, but something's wrong with my key. How are you? And oh, hello, Mr. Clark. Didn't see you there. Hello, Grace. Paul greeted her with an amiable smile. Then Grace's eyes fell on Lottie, who was seated opposite me. Lottie, what the hell? Hello, Grace, Lottie responded, looking up briefly before focusing back on me. She beamed one of her lovely smiles and gave my hand a squeeze. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting your husband before. He's very sweet, and with or without your permission, Grace, I'd like to get to know him a whole lot better. Grace stood there, seemingly in shock. If you want your presents, I said to her, well, a present and an envelope, you'll have to pick them up. They're down here by my chair. My hands are full of Lottie. And is that Lady Mia and Lord Paul. Lady Mia Clark, dear boy, Mia interjected, now holding my left hand with her left and patting my forearm with her right. I'm Ryan's mother, Lottie's mother-in-law, but I truly regard her as my only daughter and want her to be happy, which she obviously deserves. As for my sweetheart Paul, was a bus driver, Ken, and a part-time chauffeur when I met Mia's mother, Paul chimed in. For quite a while, I was a pretty mean bass player in a rock band, so I'm just plain Mr. and have been hanging on in there, with Mia, happy and grateful. Which rock band? I asked. 3 voices responded in unison. All's well. Gordon Bennett's backing band. Yeah, we were kids who grew up together, Paul smiled. Playing for fun in church halls in the early to late 60s, doing Beatles and Stones covers on weekends until Mia and I met. Then I had to sharpen up and make something of myself, especially after his lordship the Earl of Burghley disowned my lovely new wife for following her heart. So I became an impresario and did well for myself, though still playing as a guest whenever I could. Indeed, Paul was my second husband, Mia admitted. I was married off at 18 to someone my father approved of, but Christian was a complete arse. I divorced him against Daddy's wishes within a year and married Paul here, who, you must admit, has stayed the course very well. He played guest appearances with headline bands all over the world, and we traveled together before and after having our child. He managed lots of bands, organized concerts and festivals, and always forgets to mention that he was knighted for services to the music industry over 20 years ago. It was a fun ride, but I guess Ryan never wanted for anything, and he never really grew up, Paul said. We only recently heard the rumors and Ryan admitted his failed marriage was his fault. So we're looking after Lottie's interests at the moment, Mia added with a wink in my direction. You mean, but, I stammered. Oh no, Grace interrupted, stamping her foot. This is not happening. Lottie, Lady Mia, let go of my husband this instant. He's mine. Tisk. Maya shook her head as she looked up at Grace. How could you treat your husband the way you have and risk your children's happiness? I swear the blood drained from Grace's face as if a tap had been opened. Her lips trembled. What do you mean? Grace, Lottie spoke up. My sister Scarlett told me about tonight's booking a couple of months ago. She mentioned how you completely missed your 8th anniversary here and even embarrassed your parents during their Ruby wedding celebration last November by not showing up. Ken booked this table for the entire evening, prepared to wait just in case you let him down again. He was going to wait here until you turned up. As you know, my dad-in-law, Paul, has a lot of legal connections. He found out everything about your firm. Shame on you, Grace. No, but you couldn't have, Grace wailed. We were so discreet. Not discreet enough, Grace, Mia interjected before turning to me. Lawyers love to boast and gossip in chambers, so indiscretions are easily spread among their kind. Ken, we managed to tap into some of the sources for your investigative articles and drop them hints that we thought would get back to you. Sorry about the subterfuge tonight, but we're here to support you in whatever way you need. Well, I said, that explains a lot. I was amazed at what my investigator was able to find out in just a couple of months. But honey, you got me a card and a present, surely. Grace left the rest unsaid as she picked up the heavy card envelope and the very light bottle bag. She ripped open the envelope, and as soon as she saw the front of the card, she dropped it. As it hit the table, the folded papers headed "Dissolution of Marriage" spilled out, extinguishing the candle and spilling hot wax on the crisp white tablecloth. The front of the card showed a caricature of me with a shattered heart, smashed by a caricature of Grace wielding a sledgehammer. The message on the card read, "You broke my heart on Valentine's Day," while the speech bubble from Grace's caricature said, "I've got me some new partners." I couldn't get the original cartoonist who did our first Valentine, Grace. He retired and moved to Spain. But I found one just as good on Fiverr, I said. You haven't opened your gift bag, honey. Grace clutched the handle tightly. With shaking fingers, she opened the bag and peered inside, a puzzled look crossing her tear-stained face. A tin can? Grace asked, pulling it from the otherwise empty gift bag. It's one of 6, Lottie explained helpfully. But Ken only packed one. They're handy for kitchen storage. Ooh, it rattles, Grace said. I wonder what's inside. Grace lifted the clear plastic lid and peered inside before emptying the contents into her palm. "What's this?" she asked. "My wedding ring. I have no further use for it," I replied. "I took it off 3 weeks ago, and you hadn't noticed or indicated that you had. The other item is a computer memory stick with a couple hundred stills and 4 videos from the luxury flat your partners share with you in Market Square Plaza. They're not legally procured, so they aren't admissible in court, but they'd be damaging to you and your firm if leaked to the public. I only watched 2 minutes of one video. It was enough to end my marriage. My solicitor went through the whole lot, and my investigator identified the 4 individuals as partners in your firm. We've named them as correspondents in the dissolution document. Agree to the terms. Grace, sole custody of the children and house until the last child finishes further education, and will change the grounds from adultery to unreasonable behavior, like your lack of involvement in our lives. Otherwise, we'll proceed with what we have and see if your partner's marriages last longer than ours. You can visit the children as often as you like. In fact, you'll see them in the morning, since they're staying overnight with your parents, where you'll be sleeping. I changed all the locks today." "Oh shoot," she exclaimed, dropping the empty bag and putting her hands to her face. "That's why I couldn't get into the house to change. I only realized it was our anniversary when Mom rang me. I thought there was a problem with Dad or the kids. Mom called because the kids wanted to say goodnight before bedtime. They'd already kissed you goodnight when you dropped them off this morning. Oh shoot, I really screwed up, didn't I?" "No kidding, Sherlock," I replied. "We're done, I think." Looking up, I saw the restaurant manager, Michael, and his wife, Scarlett, approaching the table. We were probably causing a scene. "Sorry, Michael, for the disturbance," I said, standing up with difficulty as Lottie and Mia still clung to my hands. "I think I'm ready to go now." "No need to go, Ken," Michael soothed, "but I think Grace should depart. You'll always be welcome here, Grace, but not tonight. Tonight is for romantic lovers, not cheaters." Grace ran through the restaurant, tears streaming down her cheeks. Michael's wife, Scarlett, turned to me. "Don't worry about Grace getting to her parents' house. John Jr. has her keys and will drive her home. Lady Mia's chauffeur will follow them and bring John back. Now, what do you think of my sister?" "Who?" I asked, bewildered. "My kid sister, Lottie here. She's the baby of the family and hasn't been treated well by her man. We all hope you could help each other through your pain and show Lottie there are still good guys out there." Although I had stood up, Mia and Lottie still held my hands. I sat down again. "Good boy, Ken," Scarlett said, kissing me on the forehead and then rubbing off the lipstick with her thumb. "I'll send your waiter over for your order, okay?" "Yes, all right," I said, looking at Lottie. "Are you all right?" She smiled back. "Yes, Ken, perfectly all right." "Good, shall we order?" "Please, after all the excitement, I'm even hungrier." "So, former Chef Lottie, what would you recommend for starters?" "I have a few ideas," she grinned. "The first is that you could put my birthday in your diary, the 23rd of July. We could dine here." "Excellent. I'll leave the next few courses in your hands then, Lottie, and I'll send a photo of your likeness to my new cartoonist." Yes, I was feeling a whole lot more romantic than at the start of Valentine's Day. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.